Critical social movements often have a watershed event. Today is that event for clean air, clean energy, and a clean future for Utah. It is time to resuscitate Utah democracy and make our government reflect the will of the people which you have seen today. You are the ones that can make it happen. The battle for clean air has not been won today. It has just begun. Thank you for coming.
Across Utah, air quality is a known serious problem. Inversions are problems which have affected most people who live in Cache Valley in the Wasatch Front. Not only is it hazardous for us and our health, but our environment and atmosphere. Biological implications of unhealthy air quality will be explained later on. First, let's see how it all works and what actually has to happen in order for this to become a threat.
There are two main sources of air pollution: primary particles and secondary particles. Primary particles are directly emitted into the atmosphere by things such as diesel engines, wood smoke, road dust, soil erosion, and incomplete combustion. Secondary particles are formed through chemical reactions of different gas phase components. For instance, when fossil fuels are burned in cars and factories, they emit several chemicals. Among this mix of products is sulfur, a secondary particle. Sulfur emissions can pose a serious immediate threat to environments and air quality. When sulfur mixes with oxygen gas, it creates a new compound, sulfur dioxide. Sulfur dioxide in turn then mixes with water to form sulfurous acid. Sulfur can also be oxidized to form sulfur trioxide, then reacting with water to form sulfuric acid. Sulfuric and sulfurous acid can potentially have pHs as low as 0.3 and 1.5 respectively. That low of a pH is extremely acidic, and its existence in our atmosphere is potentially quite hazardous. Ozone is another secondary particle which has potentially bad effects. It is not necessarily as immediate of a threat as sulfur can be, but it is much more abundant and has much bigger long-term threats. Ozone is made entirely out of oxygen atoms. When high in the atmosphere, oxygen gas is exposed to ultraviolet light strong enough to break the double bond between oxygen gas. When this happens, the free oxygen atoms each have an extra electron which attracts them to other oxygen gas molecules. This forms ozone, or O3. Now, this process is not at all harmful in the upper atmosphere. In fact, it shields Earth from UV radiation. However, it does become a concern when it takes place at ground level. Ozone is a readily reactive molecule which can be bad for life when it is near to the ground. Yet another secondary particle, nitrogen, can be emitted. Internal combustion engines give off enough energy to cause nitrogen and oxygen molecules in the air to combine and form nitrogen monoxide, then reacting once again with oxygen to produce nitrogen dioxide. Nitrogen dioxide, through a series of other equations, can then form nitric and nitrous acid, each harmful to the environment. Nitric and nitrous acid can pose very similar threats as sulfuric and sulfurous acid. Through dry deposition and wet deposition, the acids harm living organisms and the environment as a whole. Another form of secondary particle is ammonium nitrate, formed when oxides and sulfur or nitrogen combine with gas phase ammonia. This harmful chemical makes up 90% of the total mass of PM 2.5 on highly polluted days.
Particulate matter 2.5, PM 2.5 are small suspended particles of air pollution. Many accumulate in Cache Valley and among the Wasatch Front, which is where the majority of Utah's population lives. With a chain of cities and towns approximately from Nephi to Brigham, surrounded by mountains directly from the east, a bowl-like setting is created. These are unhealthy levels of PM 2.5, where air is trapped at the bottom of the valley during the winter, and with a rapid growing population, Utah has been seeing an increase of enhanced inversions. These enhanced inversions occur when warm air sits on the populated valleys and cold air gets trapped below. This populated air is trapped until a storm and associated wind disturbance comes through. These inversions can last for several days to a few weeks and mostly occur between November and March. Throughout the rest of the year, Utah has good air quality, although there have been times where levels of air pollution were the highest in the U.S. Because of this, there has been consistent violation of the 24-hour average U.S. EPA National Ambient Air Quality Standards of PM 2.5 in Cache Valley and the Wasatch Front. Because of PM 2.5 is smaller than 2.5 micrometers, these particles can penetrate into human lungs and possibly enter into the bloodstream. This can lead to many heart problems, including strokes, cancer, cardiopulmonary and cardiovascular disease, asthma, pneumonia, hypertensive disease, cardiac arrest, heart disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and Alzheimer's disease. Short-term exposure, such as hours, can lead to heart attacks, and long-term exposures, such as years, can lead to a shortened life expectancy. Risk of serious heart attack increased by 15% of every increase of 10 micrograms above 25 micrograms per cubic liter of air. Increases of 10 micrograms per cubic meter of air above clean air values are associated up to 1% rise of cardiovascular death. Not only can Utah's bad air quality lead to an increase of health problems, but it can hurt Utah's economy by reducing the ability to attract new businesses, companies, jobs, quality employees, and families. For instance, in 2012, a state economic development officer testified before a Utah legislative task force concerning a foreign company would conclude their Utah site visit early upon experiencing a red air alert pollution day. Foreign companies in other neighboring states are not interested in being in a place with such high air pollution issues.
Utah's legislation has taken steps toward cleaner air, and one of their biggest was the Clean Air Act. This act is in regards to air emissions from stationary and mobile vehicles. This act also works in hand with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, which was written to protect public health and public welfare. This act also regulates emissions of hazardous air pollutants. Another action by legislation was the Air Conservation Act. The purpose of this is to maintain levels of air quality to keep humans safe and healthy. Under Chapter 2 of the Air Conservation Act 19-2-101 Part 2, it states its purpose is to prevent injury to plant and animal life and property, foster the comfort and convenience of the people, promote the economic and social development of the state, and facilitate the enjoyment of the natural attractions of this state. A new policy was also implemented by the state. This policy was to provide tax credits to those companies that choose to purchase or upgrade pollution control and migration equipment. However, this has set up many problems with not only the Department of Environmental Quality, but also the tax commissions. This brought Representative Ryan Wilcox's proposal of the pollution control amendments into the light. The bill itself goes along the lines of the need to tear down and rebuild. The biggest change, not only by the state but the federal government as well, is to see the Clean Power Plan become effective. This was written to regulate the greenhouse gas emissions of power plants, which would lead to a significant reduction of carbon dioxide in the air. In fact, it is expected to reduce CO2 emissions by 32% by 2030. Many plans have been set up and many steps are being taken to tighten Utah's effect on air. But how can you, as a citizen, contribute to this?
Well, we have a few solutions after all. For example, there are a couple different types of cars, and each type emits different amounts of pollutants. One way to lower the emissions is simply to help Utahns make the transfer to Tier 3, low sulfur fuel, and simpler to encourage transfer to cleaner Tier 3 cars. Decreasing sulfur emissions simply by changing fuel types or car type is an easy way to fix problems and by 2050 decrease air pollution by 5% daily. Helping to decrease the amount of wood burnt could also prove effective, as wood burning is a source of emission that are almost completely unnecessary, and this will also decrease pollution by 5% daily. As the mayor has said previously, it would be very effective if more travel time was spent biking, walking, or riding the bus. This is something that nearly every average citizen in the Wasatch Front can do to some extent. These solutions and many more could eventually decrease emission levels to points where it would be much less of a threat. If all these solutions were put into place, we could reduce pollutant emissions by roughly 75% in 2050. That number is staggering, however. It is worth noting that none of these changes will happen without hundreds, even thousands of average citizens standing together to make a change. This is our planet, our Earth, which we love so dearly. The technology we have achieved is amazing, but some technology like cars and factories are taking their toll on our atmosphere. Pollution affects the environment, it affects other living organisms, and it affects people like you. The air quality can make many people who already have health problems suffer. They aren't able to go outside at times because if they did, there would be serious consequences on their health. So please, travel to work on a bike, make attempts to use cleaner fuels. We can make a stand. Will you?
Let me tell you what brought me here. 2 weeks ago, we had one of our famous inversions. I was taking my daughter to school, and we were driving along 11th Avenue. And I looked out and I said, Ella, look at the fog. She said, Daddy, it's not fog, it's pollution. I thought to myself, she's 6 years old. I said, so what makes pollution? She said, well, a myriad of things, Daddy. At that point, I just let her educate me. I said, well, what happens when there's pollution? And this is why I'm here. She said, it means that we can't go out for recess. At that moment, I knew I had found my cause. Then I asked her, I said, what's the solution to these myriad of problems? She said, well, we need to grow a lot more trees, Daddy, a lot more trees. What I love about my daughter is that she just didn't point a finger and say somebody else has to take care of it. My 6-year-old daughter, a product of our wonderful education system here, which I really do believe taught her these things, because I don't remember teaching her the word myriad. But my daughter taught me that, look, it doesn't start, well, I'm not going to take all the onus off of Speaker Hughes here, but it doesn't start with the legislature, it starts with us. Well, we're here. Now, where are they? That isn't a statement, it's a question. This is a unifying rally. Sometimes we come to rallies and we want to blame the other side and we want to get upset. But my daughter taught me that we're going to plant trees. We're going to stop idling. We're going to drive cleaner cars. We're going to take mass transit. That's what we're going to do. We only expect the same from those that represent us, and that's what I'm asking Speaker Hughes to tell his folks. One last thing, I was, like many of you, I was up at Sundance hanging with the groovy people this last couple weeks, and I was sitting at a party and everybody said, where do you live? And I said, I live in Utah. And I remember the days when I didn't used to admit that. Well, I'm very, very happy today to admit that. They said, what a beautiful state. We just love it here. We love coming to Sundance, not just for the movies, but we love coming for the scenery. We love coming for the vitality. People are so nice. And then they said, if only it wasn't for the bad air that we've seen. Well, let's take care of that. Let's make this not just a pretty great state. Let's make this the best state in the country to live and breathe. Thank you very much.
Now, we ask that grown-ups clean up the big mess they have made with our air.